good morning from Ontario, Canada. Hi, Liz. Nice to see you on camera after working together on the article. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role as the director of the international school in Rheintal in Switzerland? I'd like to hear your perspective as an educator, as a director, what your vision is, and who you're about.
Okay, well, hello everybody. Good afternoon, those of you in Europe. So I live in Switzerland. You can probably tell by my accent that I am not Swiss. I am British from background. So my first country was the UK, Wales. I'm the CEO and director of the International School Rheintal in Switzerland, which those of you that do not know is on the German side of Switzerland, right next to Liechtenstein. So you can walk to Liechtenstein from where we are. We're also within 30 minutes or so of Germany, Austria, and not far from Italy as well. So we're right in the kind of heart of Europe where my school is. So I lead a small international school of students aged 3 to 18. We're an international baccalaureate school. That's our curriculum. And our students graduate here and then go to predominantly universities all around the world. So we have a local and a global student population. And I originally was a primary teacher right at the beginning, and I've had a career where I've traveled all around the world. So I've been the head teacher in schools in the States, the UK, the Netherlands, and also I've worked in Asia, so Singapore, Malaysia, and all over the world, really. So, but I'm currently in Switzerland.
How do you like it? What's the highlight of Switzerland compared to other areas?
Well, talk about highlights. It's got to be the mountains. I was actually hiking yesterday, so we were going. Let me think. We're about 2,600 meters above sea level. So hiking in the Swiss Alps. I can walk from my house to the ski lift, and then straight up onto the mountains. And those of you that have seen The Sound of Music and that last scene where they kind of come over the mountain, that was filmed just here. We can see it from the school.
That's
So
right.
we're in. Yeah, it's a kind of we don't have many famous facts, but that's one of them of this region. So we are a mountainous area. We have the Rhine running straight through and past the school. It is a breathtakingly beautiful part of the world, and I have to say, everywhere I've lived, I've loved for different reasons. But Switzerland has to be the environment and the landscape and the culture. You know, here in Switzerland, it's a very safe community, and you have students as young as 4 years old that walk themselves to school, which as a British person freaks me out. So I usually want to kind of stop the traffic, but kids here are very independent, and so it's a great place to raise children as well.
Very nice. Thank you
Yeah.
for that introduction. I have a question that dives right into the article. So the way you and I connected was because you started a scholarship program for students not from your country, not from Switzerland, from students who are displaced in Europe who are coming into Switzerland. So I wanted you to tell me the basics of setting up a scholarship program so other people who are watching or reading about it can start one. And I also want you to tell me what worked, what didn't work, and tell me a little bit about your journey setting up the program.
So I'll start at the beginning. As an international baccalaureate school, we're interested in creating young people who become global citizens and leaders of now and the future. And that's more than words, more than rhetoric. It's very at the heart of what we do. And so we're doing all kinds of programs in the community. And this is one of many. But as you know, in this part of Europe, sadly, and none of us expected it in our lifetimes, there is war in Europe. And we're 14 hours from the Ukrainian border here. And what we started to see in March when the war first broke out and Ukraine was invaded, that we started to see refugees. We use the phrase displaced people because that's the legal status in Switzerland is that Ukrainians have got a special status that has never been issued before. So our students, what we started to see in this part of Switzerland were people coming across the border, coming through Poland, coming through Austria, and starting to cross the border into Switzerland. And as I just mentioned, the Rhine here is the border between Switzerland and Liechtenstein and Austria. And so we're right on the edge of Switzerland. And we started to see people coming into our community that were refugees. So we saw teachers, Ukrainian teachers coming across the border, and they extraordinarily, actually, Ukrainian teachers were still teaching their classes remotely, just as they did during COVID. So they're displaced all around the world, but they're still teaching, which is the power of the profession, really. But one of the things we started to look at in my school is what can we do? We are a fee-paying school, but we're non-profit. So every penny that comes in or every franc that comes in goes into our school and our community. And we're strongly supported by the Hilti family Liechtenstein. It's a foundation here in the area, and they've supported the school for over 20 years. So I sat with my staff and we were like, what are we going to do? We've got young people coming across the border, and Switzerland has an extraordinary education system. For the younger students coming in the primary phase or elementary phase for those in the States, what we found is that the system here is very good at integrating students from different countries and different cultures and different languages. The problem, however, is for Ukrainian students that were age 16, 15, 16 or older, is that they would be coming into Switzerland, and the languages of Switzerland, those of you that don't know, we have the German speaking part, we have the French speaking part, and the Italian speaking part. So there are actually four key languages, but those are the three main languages in Switzerland. However, most of the students who have been educated in Ukraine are educated in Ukrainian first language, possibly Russian second language. It used to be the other way around until the 2014 incident in Crimea. But the students who are now of this age 16, and they may have their third language is most likely to be English, and not German, not French, not Italian, not Spanish. And so all of these countries that are starting to see these refugees coming in, the students do not have the language knowledge to be able to transition into the local system. Here in Switzerland, very specific system here, is students at the age 15, 16 then go on a particular track. If they're academic, they go on what we call the gymnasium track, which is the route to a university education. Those that do not meet the academic standard go on a vocational route, and they'll do an apprenticeship. Now, for these students that are age 15 or 16, if they sat the entrance paper in Swiss German, they would not meet the academic standard required to go to gymnasium, and therefore, by default, they would be on a vocational track. So this means that there's a whole generation of young people that would normally be on the university route. And of course, university is not everything, we all know that, but it is a route for many young people that would enable them to be able to have a profession. Could be law, medicine, it could be international relations. And often these are the skills and expertise that help to build countries. So if we allow this generation of young people to not reach their academic potential, which by default means their professional potential, possibly, then these young people cannot potentially rebuild their country. And so we're doing a disservice. And we knew in our school that we had the program International Baccalaureate, which enables students to study in English and also in their mother tongue or their first language. So these students could study in Ukrainian. That could be one of their subjects. So they're not only maintaining their first language, but also their home language. They can study literature in Ukrainian. So they're also maintaining their own culture. But the most important thing is that it meant that it left the university track open. So we identified, that there was a very specific gap in the education market that the local Swiss system was not equipped for, but we were. We had the skills, we've got the expertise in our teachers, we know how to support English additional language students. About 80% of our students are EAL students here, so we do it every single day, and we had the capacity to do it, but what we didn't have was the money.
Absolutely.
So
sometimes it comes down to money. Everything comes down to money in education.
That's right. And we have to protect our own community and our own students as well, and make sure that what we could do was financially sustainable. So
this leads into my next question. You fundraise.
Yeah.
You said that you use community organizations to fundraise for scholarships. Tell me how you did that. That's pretty amazing.
Well, we're incredibly fortunate in this part of Switzerland that there is a long and established culture of creating funds and foundations to support good and meaningful activity in the community. It's very community driven. So what I did is I spent a weekend with some of my team, and we wrote a long proposal explaining why what this issue was for this particular cohort of students, and what it was that we could offer. And what we didn't want to do was come up with a solution that would last 1 year, but then not enable the students to complete. So we did the full program for age 15 plus, which could be up to 3 years academic study here. We worked out all the costings, we worked out what we could do, what our contribution to it would be, and what we really needed from other people. Initially, the aim was to raise $500,000. Which would enable us to fund up to 7 students for the duration of the International Baccalaureate diploma, which is up to 3 years, 2 years normally, but some students could start in grade 10. We wrote the proposal, and we actually sent it to the Hilty family in Liechtenstein, who support us greatly, with the idea that they would maybe help a little bit, and then we would adapt that proposal to then go to other donors in the region. And extraordinarily, within 48 hours, the Hilty family came back to us, the Hilty Family Foundation Liechtenstein, and said they would fund the whole $500,000. Which was extraordinary. They were active with us. We then put in place, we promoted it in the Ukrainian community. We used Facebook because in Switzerland that was being used a lot locally. We used Telegram, which I'd never used before, but I now know all about Telegram. So where a lot of the Ukrainians that were coming across Europe were communicating with each other. And we asked everyone to share it. It went everywhere that we were offering the scholarships. We then invited the students in, and we also knew, in the middle of all this, by the way, I'm actually hosting Ukrainian families in my own home. So I was learning a lot about the Ukrainian system. We're dealing with families that are traumatized, young people that are completely displaced. And so how do you make the decision who to give the scholarship to or not? And we wrote in the proposal a really clear outline as to how we would evaluate these students. And we decided to evaluate it. We were looking for academic potential, because we were looking at university track. That's the group we're aiming at. And then we were also looking, we couldn't come up with any better phrase than stickiness. So how likely would it be that their family would stay in this part of Switzerland to enable them to complete their education here? What we didn't want to do was to put money into a student that maybe stays 6 months, and then the family relocates because of circumstance, and then that money that is not realized in the potential of that student being able to complete the program. So we looked at those two things. We invited every student in individually. We did no group assessments because we felt every student needed to have individual attention. And that took us about 3 hours for each individual student. And we had over 40 came in. So you can imagine how much time that was for our staff and faculty. And our team here were amazing. They all, right from our administration team right at the front desk, all the way through to our learning support team that did the assessments, everyone went above and beyond to assess with kindness, with time. So even if those students were not able to get a scholarship here, they would hopefully feel that it was, they were valued through this process. So we ended up, originally we were hoping to fund 5. We were able to fund 7 actually in the end. And those students started in April. And following their start, I think we're going to talk a little bit about their start in a moment, how to transition them. But we also, aside from that, once, because it was very out in the public, the work that we were doing, is we got approached by another donor that is a foundation in the area that is a private funder that came from a family, from a man who had been a refugee as a child, and he had gone on to have an extraordinary life and had economically done very well for himself. When he died, he left a trust fund that is for refugee young people, that the money can only be used to help those students, so that the fact that they're a refugee does not stop them on their journey to greatness. And so they also funded 2 additional students, and those are longer scholarships. We've taken 1 student last year into grade 7 and 1 into grade 8, and they will be fully funded by the foundation for the rest of their time here. So I think what I learned through this process is that people and organizations want to do the very best. And what we can do as educators It's really see what is the difference that we can make, and then prepare it in a coherent format so that your possible funders and donors understand what their contribution could be, how long it would be, and also all the possible implications. What if this happens? What will we do? What if a student leaves? What will you do? And if you cover all that in a really clearly detailed plan, then donors feel a confidence in that and they are likely to support you. And they did.
Which is wonderful. Now, the students, have they settled in since April?
So it's really
It's
interesting.
not a nice situation. I don't take the situation for granted at all. Coming from a sudden war, displaced, coming into a country, settling in is no easy task.
Yeah, it's we're still in it, and that's it can't be underestimated. The small things that could then suddenly divert you and divert students. So what we did initially, it was very important in our community that the students were integrated quickly. That they weren't the Ukrainian students as well. We've had to get away from that kind of phrasing. That they're just students in our school that happen to be financially supported.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we did is just really simple operational things. Is we knew at that time the initial 7 that joined us, they some of them were living in refugee centres. Some of them were, interestingly, 3 of the students had been housed by our parents, so were as homestays. Like I said, I've got a student staying with me, and so what we did is we thought, well, they don't have things like pens, pencils, calculators, the stuff that all of us have lying around everywhere. Usually I find them behind the sofa somewhere. We've got all these kinds of things. Sandwich packs, for lunch. How do you organize that? Water bottles. So we did mega orders of backpacks and everything we could think of that they could possibly need. The students then helped us, and we packed them. I actually put them all aside. I told the students, I'd like, everything's now here. We're going to pack it at lunchtime. If you're free, come along. The whole of grade 9 and 10 came, all of them.
I'm so glad to hear about this part because when I saw the picture of it, I wanted you to talk about it. If not, I was going to ask you the question. What are in those backpacks and what was the purpose and how did it come about? So the grade 9s and 10s helped, and then what happened?
So they all wrote, it was their idea. They said we should write them a message. So they actually got their application forms from the scholarship, because I had them in my file for all their names.
Yeah.
And they looked at them. They read where the student was from, what the student liked. And then they all wrote, they said, right, I'm going to take this student. So they took the backpack. They then went and packed it with all the different things, decided what colors the person might like, which bits they might like. And then they got a postcard from ISR, and they wrote them a personal message of welcome to our school. I then thought, well, I'm going to put, because we even put our fancy, graphic calculators and all of that in there, because we thought they can't buy them, so we'll provide them as part of the scholarship. They also we provided Macs for them as well, so they all had one-to-one devices that they could use during their time here. And so everything was ready to go. And I thought, I'm going to put them in my office safe until Monday morning. And the students looked at me and they said, no, 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 no. They're not, we've got to give them to them. They can't go in your office. So they went and put them all in their homerooms and locked all the doors. It was amazing. And on the day, it was the students that greeted them, which was the most powerful way of accepting a new, not just, it's a new student, but also a student that has come from a traumatic experience. And it was a way of saying you're part of our community. And what was extraordinary for me is we also invited the parents and all of the existing parents in grade 9 and 10 to come and meet the parents as well of the Ukrainian families. And we did a coffee morning. And what I also thought was beautiful, we have Russian families in our school as well. And the Russian families came. And it said straight away that in our school, everybody is welcome, everyone is safe, and everyone has a right to be here. Whether you are Russian, whether you're Ukrainian, whether you're Swiss, British, American, doesn't matter what background you have, here it is a safe and inclusive space. And it was a really, really beautiful moment. But of course, that's the beginning. In some ways, that's the easy bit. Because now we have the tough bit. And this is where it's not been easy. We've had students whose parents have really struggled being here, really struggled. They don't speak the language. They can't see how they can settle here. And to the point where some students have been left here. So their parents have gone back to Ukraine and they have been left as unaccompanied minors with us.
Now,
And
is
so
there government help from your programming end for education and students in schools? So, what I mean by government help is there opportunities for student loans or student financial assistance where they can get a loan but pay it back once they're back out of school?
not at this age, not as an unaccompanied minor. Switzerland has been incredibly welcoming to many, many, I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, I've been stood at the immigration center with a family that I had for a little while. And it's been very welcome. It provides housing, and everyone is okay. Make sure that people have the basic needs. It helps with language immersion as well. But for students of this age, in Switzerland, you're a minor until you're 18.
Correct.
And so that means that if parents give up parental rights, then the state takes legal responsibilities for these young people. And what families in our community have done is an extraordinary situation is that they have agreed to those students staying as a homestay. So the parents retain their parental rights, and it's like a foster family. So the families, so we have now, gosh, 4 of our Ukrainian students are now living with foster families, including me. I've got a 16-year-old who I'm now fostering for 2 years. And they live with us, they're part of our families. But they're, of course, Ukrainian, and they have their families. And their families are, some of them are now back in Ukraine because they've got elderly grandparents, and many reasons why the other family members need to be back in Ukraine. So this is the situation that's really hard is, and we know in the international community, because we are an international school and we deal with transition, we deal with third culture children. You know, my children, I've got a 9 and 11-year-old, not my fostered one, but my 2 that I are biologically mine. And and you know, they have lived in the UK, they've lived in the Netherlands, they've lived in Switzerland. And if I'm watching something like the Olympics, my son will be cheering Switzerland and will be cheering the Netherlands, and he considers himself to be Swiss and Dutch and British. I have pointed out his passport status, but identity, of course, is not the passport that you hold. So
Yes.
it's the same. So we're very used to dealing with the mental health aspects of loss, of transition. Yeah, it's very normal to deal with that in the international sector. But here we're dealing with such unknown. You know, I was talking to a student this morning about their future and what options to take. He started the diploma program, and we have to think, well, if he doesn't take mathematics at a higher level, then he can't stay in Switzerland. So then where would he go? If he went to the Netherlands, what would happen then? If he managed to get a student permit to go to the Netherlands, can he work? Where's the money coming from? So there are some really big decisions that these young people have to make now that can impact their future, and they're trying to make certainty out of uncertainty. And that's the hard bit, because as educators we can do our bit, but we don't know what's going to happen to these young people. We don't know what will happen in 1 year, let alone 2 years. So the bit that we try to hold on to as a school is to, again, it comes down to that proposal, is know our part in this. Our part is to provide a warm, caring, academic environment that these students can just be students and not always have to deal with the complexities of being a refugee or a displaced person, whichever language you prefer to use. So it's even
Uncertainty of a displaced student is what connects everyone together. However, with that uncertainty, there is no certainty on anything, right? They don't know when they can go back. They don't know how long this is going to last, since March, and no one does.
no.
We're hoping that we can all figure it out, because it is the year that we need to figure it out as a global community and know that we need to work together as countries, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we need to make sure that these students have access to education, that that they're able to be 16 and 17-year-old young people, that they can go to the fair with the other students on a Saturday night and have a bit of fun, and it's okay. It's okay for them to have fun. And that's hard too, because they then take the calls. You know, they're on Telegram or they're on whatever they're calling on, whatever system, and they're hearing of missiles going over their houses, or their grandfather learning how to use a gun in case they come into his house. You know, those are their kind of experiences that they're having. And of course, these are not the only students to experience trauma. You know, we know in all of our schools, we have students that are coming in with all kinds of different life experiences. So, you know, I sometimes hear some of the tension is, why is this such a big thing for the Ukrainians? Well, what about the Ugandans? What about the Afghans? You know, just looking, if we're looking at nationalities and some of the refugees that we have in our kind of area in this part of Europe. And I think what we have to be really mindful of is that we need to live the missions that we have as a school. And in our school, it's around becoming global citizens and responsible and engaged people. And so this is one of the ways that we can make a difference in a very real life situation right now. And my intention as the leader of this school is to make sure that these students can complete their education and have access to universities if that's the route that they choose to go down. So that's the bit that we can do, and we hold steady with it.
I think that is leveling the playing field. That's what it means. If you give them the option and not close the door, and they can open all doors to get successful, that's what's important. And I think that's really wonderful to hear. Is there anything else you wanted to share that anyone who's watching who doesn't know something about building relationships and how to build that relationship? Because I didn't write about it in the article, but you are fostering and you do have homestay students. Can you touch base with a little bit of information about how that's going?
Well, this is really an interesting and unexpected experience for us. So personally, we opened our house to a Ukrainian family that were displaced, and the family situation resulted, like I said, in the young person now staying with us. And what I've learned, I mean, I'm laughing as I'm saying it, is that I've learned to be less British. So as I, I know about as British culture, like I said, I've lived and worked all around the world, is that we don't always say what we mean. So out of politeness, we're not very direct sometimes. And I've learned in managing this kind of situation for certainty that everybody has to be really honest about what is happening. So silly things. If something irritates you, I don't know, like arriving late for something. Oh, time is always an interesting one when we're talking about culture in different countries and expectations about time. And we know that in the international community, if you do a children's party here, we will have some people arriving before the time, some people arriving bang on, and some people arriving 2 hours later. So, and that's all cultural. It's all culturally related around time. So what I've learned in the student that I have is to take nothing for granted, is to actually kindness is the most important thing. Being honest about how you're feeling and creating a safe space for that young person to not be okay as well. So the student that we have with us, the deal we had with the parents that we that trusted us with him, and we are very honored to have him stay with us, is that he would become part of our family. We're not having a lodger. He's a young person, and if we go, every year we go to Spain for our summer holidays, he comes too. So he's my children refer to him as their brother by another mother, and I'm not sure whether that's what I really imagined. But it's with love, and I know that sounds a little trite, but it is the most important thing, is that we love him and we care for him as one of our family, as an extended member of our family, and we are consistent and honest. So, and I think probably if you speak to other foster families, that's what they would say, is that you have to create a space where you can say uncomfortable things and be okay with it, and warm, because it's got to be a home. It's got to be a place where a young person can let off steam, can be upset. We can disagree as well, and you're not treading on eggshells. So when you have a visitor to your home, everyone's on best behavior. You can't maintain that when someone's living with you. And of course, for this particular student, my children have to deal with this as well. I'm also the CEO and director of the school, so that makes it it's not the most fun thing in the world to have your mum that's the CEO and director of the school that you're in. So we put in place really clear lines about what's school stuff, what's home stuff, when am I mum, when am I director, and we put those lines in place and try to stick to them.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that experience, because I think that little bit of information about home life is what everyone else needs to hear if they ever wanted to foster, or if they wanted to think about opening those doors to homes to see what's happening behind the scenes, because that's something, teaching online or working with people online, you notice is you can have this perfect life that you're trying to build, but there's a lot of things that go behind the scenes that make it perfect. And I think for a student who's coming in from a war-torn area, displaced, and is going through massive amounts of stress, um, that relationship you have built within the school and within the home is what's going to connect them and help them become successful. I mean, it was definitely the case, um, as a child when I grew up in Sri Lanka, experiencing war and actually seeing it. It's not on TV, it's really happening in real life. You need to really be able to be yourself, but deal with your emotions and how you feel about the situation as well. And I think if you give that opportunity for students to be themselves, they will be very successful. Thank you so much for your time and sharing what you did in your school to make it a success for students. Is there anything else we did not touch base on that you would like to talk about?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm aware of time, but I think one of the things that was very important for us was community. We have our international community, but also keeping roots. And I think for displaced students, particularly if they're here by themselves, and now I have, like I said, 3 or 4 of them that are now without their families. So flying solo here in Switzerland is one of the things we did is we used part of the scholarship funding to recruit a Ukrainian teacher who was also a refugee. And so finding connection with other people that have the same lived experience is, even when I live with this student in my home, I'm seeing it every day, but I'm not walking in his shoes. And so it was very important for us to do that with that funding. Part of that funding was used for it. Of course, it did a good thing. It gave somebody else a job who needs it. And we have an amazing, amazing Ukrainian teacher. She is a professor of Ukrainian literature who taught at the university, one of the universities in Ukraine. And now we have her as a high school Ukrainian literature teacher, which is amazing. And but not just that, we actually employed her for a little percentage extra from her teaching load so that she could be available for the emotional support for students. Even sitting in a study room and having a coffee with them and speaking Ukrainian will offer some semblance of normality and support in the school as well. So I think making sure that there are connections to their roots, to history, it will help them settle into the environment as well, because they are, yes, displaced, but their story is also now part of our story, and we need to honor that and bring that into our community as well. So that's one of the things that I think we're still learning. We're learning a lot about Ukrainian food.
I think food connects people at home and at school. So I think that's a great way to start, right? To
It is.
actually have a meal together and have that conversation. I think that would be wonderful. You said you had coffee and introductions. There you go. That's the start. Have coffee, tea, whatever.
And loads of chocolate. I've discovered Ukrainians love chocolate. And of course, in Switzerland.
Bring the things in that connect the conversation. I think it's really important. It's like you're serving your community and what's happening to your community as it happens. Now, we all hope from North America that this is not a permanent situation. I do not know how that feels. I have goosebumps even talking about it. But I'm hoping that when it ends, if it ends today, that's great. We still have done something positive and we have connected, and you will always stay connected with the community, but we do hope that it ends
Yes.
sooner, right? Today would be nice
Yes.
than
Yes.
tomorrow, because it is very unfortunate what you're going through in Europe currently.
Yes, it's not something, as my grandfather was a soldier in the Second World War. He had brothers that were killed in D-Day, and when we talked about that in Europe, I never imagined, I genuinely didn't think that this would happen on our doorstep. That literally I can drive from my house to a war zone. It just blows my mind, and I can't. I don't understand it. I don't pretend to understand it. what I know is that this is not okay, not just in Ukraine, anywhere. This is not okay. You know, humanity has to prevail. And what we can do as educators, you know, we can look at the work that Mandela did. And when we think about what is the most powerful gift we can give our young people, is an education to know that we can do better. And it's something that is a duty that we all have in our profession, whether it's in our own communities that we're dealing with. You know, I was just reading some things from some of my colleagues working in London over the weekend, have dealt with some pretty terrible things with knife crime and young people. You know, whatever it is that's going on in your community, is actually what we need to do is to empower each other and to enable each other to thrive and to make a better world for everyone. And I think this is just one example of where we have failed. We failed our young people, and we need to acknowledge that and empower our young people to take a lead and not allow this to happen anymore. It's
Now,
got to
the
stop.
Russian students you have, how are they handling it? Because remember, it's two ways, right? Differences happen between two groups. Now, one, obviously, in this case, there's two groups, and they also feel the stress. And they
They
also
do.
feel the community connection getting lost because it's happening to them as well. Are they connected to the Ukrainian students? Are you building more peace education where they understand to work together? I mean, it could be something you're thinking about in the future. Obviously, it doesn't have to be right
It's
now.
inherent in an international baccalaureate education. Everything that we do is around global citizenship. Literally every lesson that you go into. So here doesn't need to be an add-on. It's part of who we are.
Yes,
And one of the things I was going to say is our country leaders and their behaviour does not reflect every person in that country. So as a British person, although I vaguely find Boris Johnson entertaining, he is not representative of every British person or what every British person thinks. And it's the same if we're looking at Russia. Vladimir Putin's behavior as the leader of the Russia, that they have taken particular actions, that does not represent every Russian person or every Russian person's views. And I have to say that the community here in this part of Switzerland, it's the Russian community that have been at the forefront of supporting Ukrainian families coming in. They've helped with housing. They've been here on the welcome days, and they have a shared language of Russian, which, of course, most older Ukrainians, people of my age and above, it's their first language in many parts of Ukraine. So I think the general sense of every person has a right to live and to be healthy and to be well, to be able to live in their home without fear, is the overriding sense in our community. And of course, it's difficult. Our community is being affected in different ways. Our Russian families are affected in different ways. Sanctions are having an impact. So this is a complex situation that is not going to get easier, I don't think, in the coming months. I wish it would. I hope and pray for things to improve. But what I've also learned is that we can only affect the things we can affect. So you
absolutely.
could almost be pushed into a point of stasis where you do nothing because it feels so big. So my advice would be, our bit was we noticed this group of students that needed help and we could help them. And we did some unusual things that we'd never done before to make that happen. But we do that as educators every day. I mean, look how we plan our lessons. All the time we're doing weird and creative stuff. So I would say is really look at your own communities. What's the bit that you can make a difference? If you see something that is fundamentally destabilizing your community, or something that is really quite significant, is what is your school's mission, vision, and values? And always come back to it. What are you trying to achieve? And what can your faculty do? How can you harness the potential of your faculty, who are ethically driven people? They are teachers. It's a vocation and a profession. And I think when you start to appeal to that, you'll spot straight away what you can do. And it's the small bits. If we all do this small bit, the cumulative effect, hopefully, and I am an idealist, is that we can move beyond what we see today.
I pretty much think I have one thing in common with you that I found just now. I'm definitely an idealist. I totally believe in the good of the world. That's why I came into teaching. That's why I continue to be a teacher and an educator. Because if you don't believe that things are going to get better and things are good, I don't know how you can do this job that we do every day, right? It is something you have to believe that change is important. People can change their beliefs, their viewpoints, and if they come from a conflict, which is what drives war, I think, you need to find that common ground, because I've never taken a side. I don't take a side. I don't believe in taking sides. I think it's important to know, to understand the conflict and teach each other to know the differences of cultures, of celebrations, of traditions, to have commonalities as a humanity, right? Being human is important. I think that's something we definitely have in common. I'm a positive thinker. I really like to see every situation in a positive light, and that's important. Thank you for sharing this with
That's
us.
okay.
I hope you had fun. Thank you from Ontario. Thank you for our viewers who are listening in. We definitely do not want to get into politics, but education, I think, is the key. Education and educators around the world make a huge impact and difference. And we're not perfect. We're all our individual selves, and we bring in knowledge that we have and our experiences, and we learn every day as educators. So thank you, Liz. I'm
Thank you.
hoping that you have a great journey, and we stay in touch and communicate. I thank you for sharing how you set up the scholarship program, so other schools listening in can do the same, hopefully, and how you created comfort in your school and at home, so there's a connection for the students to be themselves, and hopefully we hear positive news from the whole experience. um, that's it from me. I think it was a great conversation. I thank you for taking the time during the summer months while you're on vacation to help me put the article together. And I can't wait for it to come out and other teachers to read it.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for watching and learning with us at SchoolRubric with educators from across the globe. For more access to articles, magazines, podcasts, live episodes, our international school directory, courses, and more, visit us at schoolrubric.org. Thank you.